Hello viewers and welcome to the Dailies on Echo Television International, where we look at various stories that are making it the lead on our paper, especially in relation to the address of the president yesterday, where he made some very important and key highlights. And I think it is important that through the paper we'll look at some of the highlights and then we see what can be done, recommendations, and how Nigeria can be better. And I have to use this medium to also wish you a happy new month, being the 1st of August 2023. I am Stella Elisha Dasham, and I will be doing this together with Rachel Tansay. Good morning.
Morning, Stella.
Happy New Month.
Thank you. I wish you same.
Thank you so much. We're live on Facebook and on YouTube. You can follow us there live and drop your comment or your contribution of any of the story that is of interest to you this morning. Let us go through the papers, and I'll be starting with this day newspaper. Labour insists on nationwide protest from tomorrow, with the rider for Tinubu's ability to control inflation, gasoline prices. We are dealing with crude cabals, dealing with oil cabals, says Bajabia Miller. And then also coming from the NSA, we inherited a very bad situation. Civil society group backs Labour mobilized members. You can find more detail on the front page and on page 10. Federal government to file now peaceful protest, no justification for disrupting, shutting down essential services. Detail of that story can be found on page 36. Stock market gained 7.1 trillion naira in 7 months amid the foreign exchange reforms. You can find all of that on page 10. The big story, Tinubu Bimon state of economy says after darkness come glorious dawn, with some very important riders following that says claims national wealth dull on favorable terms to handful of people who became filthy rich. To spend 75 billion naira to create jobs in manufacturing sector between now and March 2024. Energize small and medium enterprises with 125 billion naira. Devote 100 billion naira to purchase of 3,000 units of 20-seater CNG fuel buses. Orders release of 200,000 metric tons of grains to households nationwide. To liaise with Labour for upward review of minimum wage. Promises necessary intervention to halt exchange rate depreciation, fuel price increases, and inflation. Tinubu broadcast waste of time, Atiku's aide declares. You can find detail of this inside the paper. We have the picture story here. President holds decoration ceremony for service chiefs. That was yesterday. Nigeria seek World Health Organization assistance for emergency deployment against diphtheria. You can find that story on page 8. You can find all of that, and that's all on this day newspaper.
On Daily Independent, we've saved over 1 trillion naira from subsidy cut in 2 months. Statement coming from Tinubu says salary increase for civil servants coming soon. Bow and go overshadows Senate ministerial screening. Lawmakers okay Wike on Yocha, 12 others as ministers. The big story on the paper, fuel subsidy removal. Despite federal government assurances, Labour insists on strike and protest. Aviation Railway Unions join NLC planned action. Senate appeals to Labour, moves to intervene. You start with the details on the front page and continue on page 29. Sanwo-Olu slashes transport fares by 50%, rolls out palliatives. Tinubu okays buses for students of tertiary institutions. The writer under the story charges service chiefs on teamwork, decorates team with new ranks. Tinubu appoints Ngalale as special advisor on media and publicity. Leaves for Benin Republic tomorrow. More details can be found on page 7. Still on Daily Independent, foreign exchange reevaluation throws manufacturing giants into huge losses. Dangote Sugar, Nestle, NB post 136.364 billion naira in the second quarter of 2023. These are the losses that these companies, Dangote Sugar, Nestle, and then the NB post have seen for the second quarter of this year. At the downside of the paper, controversy trails return of Sanusi's portrait at Kano Government House. You can find more details on page 7, and we have a picture story showing Tinubu and his vice decorating one of his service chiefs, and that's all the news on Daily Independent.
On Nigerian News Direct, on ministerial screening, Wike Kyari Badoru orders on easy ride as Senate clears Tinubu's nominees. You can find detail on page 4. The big story for the paper: fuel subsidy removal, elites fight back to retain illicit profit coming from President Tinubu. With some riders that say multiple exchange rate policy diverted monies to elite of elite. Identifies over 1 trillion naira savings from subsidy. Federal government to provide 1 billion naira credit facility at 9% per annum to 75 manufacturers. Hint on purchase of 3,000 units of 20-seater CNG fuel buses. Federal government labor to meet again today. So you can find all of that on page 21. NNPCL to increase aggressive gas development, gas transportation project coming from Kyari. Police established school protection squad. You can find detail of that on page 11. Adjust with disruptive technologies, NCCE VC advises businesses. And on fuel subsidy, Sanwo-Olu rolls out relief measures to ease burden on Lagosians. You can find that on page 2. And we have the picture to show you what the governor of Lagos State was saying in regards to that. And you can find detail of all the story inside the paper. And that's all on Nigerian News Direct.
On New Telegraph cashless policy, POS deals rise by 51.747% to 5.87 trillion naira. You can start with the details on the front page and find the remaining inside the paper. CBN exempts PMBS MFBS from cash withdrawal limit. Now we're talking about microfinance banks from cash withdrawal limit. You can find the details on page 8. Reps to probe NCAT over illegal sale of training helicopters for 1.2 billion naira. Ministerial nominees take a bow and go, Senate tells Wike and 8 others. And on insecurity, IGP OK school protection squad. Judiciary loses 2 judges in 1 day. You can find more details on page 2 and 3. The big story on New Telegraph: federal government plans 400 billion naira intervention for manufacturing and MSMEs and agri sectors. No alternative to hardship from subsidy removal. The statement coming from Tinubu. Now the federal government is saying labor to determine new minimum wage, states over 1 trillion naira saved from subsidy removal in 2 months. Hints on possible intervention in rising fuel price. OPS Enlut's intervention says gesture will revive dying sector. Broadcast deceptive, uninspiring, a day statement coming from Atiku. And on Niger coup, ECOWAS sanctions and jeopardize $13 billion Trans-Saharan gas pipeline project. PEPTOB dismisses EIU's prediction as biased and self-serving. And on vandalization, federal government orders increased security on second Niger bridge. More details can be found on page 30. Still on New Telegraph, despite broadcast, NLC insists on strike. Doubts Tinubu's ability to control inflation and fuel price. Senate intervenes Senate intervenes in impasse, says action can plunge Nigeria into deeper economic woes. Oil cabal powerful, but government dealing with them. A statement coming from Bajabian Milan. More details can be found on page 3 and 5. President removes restriction on students' loan, approves buses for students in higher institution, holds arbitrary rise in sundry fees for institution. Lagos announces 50% slash in bus fares. More details can be found on page 3 and 5. At the downside of the paper, we have a study: daily chores might slash cancer risk. So if you're feeling your house chores are too much for you, it's about time you find more and add to what you're already doing. The details can be found on page 7, and that's all the news on New Telegraph.
On the leadership newspaper, on innovation, Unit School Bags Osibanjo organization. You can find detail of that story on page 6. Still on the issue of diphtheria, killed 83, including the FCT. You can find more of that story on page 7. And we have what's trending: Lagos government slashes bus fare, and then price of petrol may rise further. You can find both stories on page 2. Head of service accuses MD8 of abusing recruitment weavers. You can find that story on the front page and on page 7. Senate screen Wiki 13 other nominees, 9 take a bow. And we have the big story on hardship. Tinubu begs for understanding. Labour insists on strike. Federal government rolls out some palliative measures, which we can see the leadership took some time to highlight a little. So we'll talk about that a little further when we look at other papers. Leadership postponed conference on drug abuse. You can find that on page 6. NSA meets Southeast governors over the killing, especially in regards to what we're having with the IPOP there. Naseni seek ban on solid material export. You can find that story on page 18. That's all on the leadership newspaper.
On Nigerian Tribune, Oyo workers protest and log secretariat, demand palliative payment of salary deductions, leave bonus, come to round table, only 2 months salary deductions. Oh, this is a statement coming from the government. And then Osun CSO stage protest over non-provision of palliatives. Senate screens Wike, Edu, Tunji Ojo, 11 others sustain bow and go practice. Battle rages in state yet to get ministerial nomination. More details can be found on page 16. We have a picture story, service chiefs decorated with new ranks. More details can be found on page 8. The big story on Nigerian Tribune, national broadcast, salary review coming, 125 billion naira to energize medium-scale businesses. A statement coming from Tinubu, and the writer under the story approves buses for tertiary institutions, removes restriction on student loans. Sanwo-Olu okays 50% fare reduction in BRT ride and water transportation. More details can be found on page 2 and 3. We have key points in the president's speech, some which the government to spend 75 billion naira to fund 75 enterprises at 9% per annum interest rate in 9 months, 1 million nano businesses to get 50 billion naira conditional grant, 1,300 nano businesses in each of the 774 local government to get 50,000 naira each, and many more. And the details you can find inside the paper on pages 2 and 3. Adamawa looting police around 110. More details can be found on page 4. And on PEPC, Tinubu Atiku Obi to adopt final written addresses today. Nigeria records 839 cases, 83 diphtheria deaths in 8 states. And at the downside of the paper, mixed reaction trail Tinubu's address. Expert express concern on loan moratorium, rules of other tiers of government. Obe comments president says powerful team needed to implement policy. Speech done to convince organized labor not to embark on protests. A statement coming from Atiku's aide. Labor doubt his ability to control inflation. Gasoline price insists on strike. You can find more details on page 3. And that's all the news on Nigerian Tribune.
So, Rachel, let's talk about the president's speech. Yesterday during one of the programs, Nigeria Now, we actually said, let the people know that the president will be addressing them. And he did address Nigerians yesterday around 7 p.m., which was on most of the network broadcasting stations, including the radio for those who are able to connect. And he made quite a very long list of things he hoped to achieve. And, you know, one thing that stand out for me was when he said that there is no way out of this hardship. If he knew the way out, he would be where he is presently. And of course, he said he understands the pain of Nigerians. And I remember over and over, we have been saying this here. Sometimes our leaders say they understand, but I don't really think they do understand what is happening. Of course, he rolled out what he hoped to do for businesses, students, and even promised the workers that very soon he was going to review their salary. And a worker will ask how soon is soon. Of course, we've seen Articles 8 saying that the president made that speech just to stop labor from going on strike. But we've seen labor are insisting they are still going on that strike tomorrow. They are having another meeting again today. But when you look at the entire things he hoped to do, the grains to share for farming and all of that, and we've seen a number of states that are already, we had protests in Oyo State. We're seeing also in Osun State, they're about to stage a protest over non-provision of palliative. In Adamawa, we saw where residents looted the warehouse of Nema to steal some grains and other things. And I listened to the speech of the deputy governor of Adamawa State. Before the speech of the president, she was mentioning the fact that the residents of Adama were thinking that the palliative was already sent to the state, and that was why they went into that house. But she wants to let the resident know that nothing whatsoever has been given to them yet. They are hoping within this week that they will get the grains, and then they'll be able to share to people, and whatever palliative the federal government can, afford. But then we are seeing various states already making up ways that they can help their own residents of their state. We've seen Lagos slashing transport fare by 50%. We've seen Kwara going to increase salary, 10,000 naira hardship allowance. A number of states have done that. We've seen even private parastatals increasing the salary of their workers and all of that. But then looking at the speech of the president, all of this cannot be made possible when we don't talk about security, when you don't have people that can spearhead the policy that you hope to do. How do you intend to share some of this money to these small and medium enterprises you're hoping to? Because he's budgeting between now to March 2024. So that's like about 8 months policy and all of that before we see other measures. So what is your take concerning all of this speech coming from the president?
Sela, if I'm to be honest, if I was the chairman for the NLC, I would still go on with my protest and then eventually strike. Because let's call a spade a spade. This is a speech, Sela. It is nothing but a speech. It stops there. It might sound good, it might look good, but it is a speech. It is not a signed document of the president approving 75 billion naira and saying, I have set this committee, this is your rule of term, I have signed this, 75 billion naira is at your disposal, do this. This is not him saying, okay, this is the 50,000, the money for the 50,000 naira that will be given to 1,300 nano businesses all over the 774 local government in Nigeria. These are not signed documents approving the disbursement of these funds, saying, okay, we have set up set committees, and as soon as I am done with my speeches, these things will start with immediate effect, Sela. We're looking something that it could take the next 3 months, and the government are still telling us, be patient, we are working on this, be patient, we're working on it. So it's still what it is. It is a speech, Sela. It's not a document giving an order for the effective start or implementation of this thing. Is still a speech. And yes, it is good. Security is missing from it. And also, yes, there is no doubt that the president on his own alone doesn't have the entire power to be able to curb inflation. There are many factors in play, and these are all things that the government can control. However, I keep saying one of the things they can do is to trace back what they didn't get right concerning some of the policies that led to where we are going to. And yes, of course, more and more, we are looking at the fuel pump price going higher, meaning in the next 2 months, this 50,000 naira might do nothing to this nano business. In fact, in the next 2 months, we will have many of them going out of business before this money probably reaches them. So yes, let Labour still go on with what they want to do, their protests. I believe that the only reason that can stop Labour, if they truly have the mind of Nigeria from not doing what they want to do, is waiting for the implementation. The moment these things, these good plans that the government have start being implemented, then we can say, you know what, they've heard us and they are going to do something about it. They have started doing something about it, so we don't have any reason protesting or even planning on going on a strike, because it's the same for the palliative. We have been patient, and we are seeing that months and months have gone and nobody has started receiving anything concerning this palliative. So how then do we believe that this is a bigger plan than palliative, Sela? When you look at it, if palliatives are yet to be out there, then how sure are we that these ones that are way bigger, this is going to need a lot of work? Because how do we locate these 1,300 nano businesses and make sure we're giving this 50,000 to the best in 774 local government in this country? We're seeing release of 200,000 metric tons. This is more work than palliative, Sela. So it's not something that is going to start with immediate effect. If palliative we've not seen. Talk more of these plans that looks bigger than disbursing palliative. So yes, for me, I feel the Labour are still on the right track for insisting that they are still going to go on with their protest, because it is a speech as it is now. It's not documents that have approved the implementations with committees that have already stand by ready to start doing the work.
Richard, if you ask me, I feel this whole palliative thing is another looting in disguise, because the issue of the 500 billion naira that was being given to the president, the House, actually granted him that loan so they could share the palliative to Nigerians. Till date, I'm yet to hear how or what will be done about that. Now, the question will be, if we want to spend a lot of money to pay palliative, why did we remove the first subsidy in the first place? Why did we stop it then, Richard? Yes. I think it's better we'll have just kept paying the first subsidy, and then Nigerians will have a very good livelihood, and then we'll be able to trace the oil cabals that till date were yet to have names on our papers. Nigerians kept asking, all right, if you have removed the first subsidy, nothing whatsoever have we heard that you are planning to revive all our refineries that have been lying out idle without anything being done. Kaduna is there. You're yet to even fix security so that we can have that refinery get working. We have another refinery in Rivers and over there, and also in Delta. And we've seen on the paper, Rachel, illegal refineries are working in these states. That we have our own refineries that are lying down. Then what really is the problem? Why is the government not saying anything about, okay, we hope to do this? We have that of Dangote that is supposed to start operating. We're already in August, so we are hoping to see it, getting into work. I remember you and I were asking, why do we have over 11,000 Indians working there? And then over, I think the next day we saw where they said that some Nigerians were also part of the brains that actually make the refinery what it is presently. But there's still a lot of work to be done there. So to me, Richard, I feel that this is another looting in disguise, because just like you said, we're yet to hear the committee that in charge of that. Till date, we still have some unrecorded money that was being given to the Humanitarian Affairs Ministry. Till date, nothing. We don't know how many schools were under the school feeding project. We don't know how many people were able to gain one or two things coming from that ministry. So a lot of questions will actually, a lot of people are raising brows on that. And I hope that the president will actually sit back with his, hopefully, I'm hoping these ministers will start, because we've seen over 13 have already been screened. So hopefully the screening will still continue. And then I hope that I'll see that the ministry will start working fast. Honestly, it's my desire, because just like you said, this is a long-term. Nigerians are hoping, okay, tomorrow, let me see that 20,000 have been given. The 12 million household today, we don't know the review, whether it's still 8,000 or not. I was hoping that would be captured in the speech yesterday, but nothing was mentioned in that regard. So I just hope things will actually roll out to be better than it is present.
And you make mention of the refineries, and we clearly saw it on the paper where they say they have been able to save 1 trillion naira so far from subsidy removal, and this is enough to start fixing our refineries, Sele. It is enough to get the work done. It is enough
for us. We're not starting from the scratch.
We're not starting from the scratch. So yes, it is enough to have at least perhaps one fully running, and okay, now together with the Dangote refinery, and then before we have the rest following with the money that will be saved subsequently from the subsidy removal. So Nigeria is making revenue. I know we do have revenue drop. We are seeing that even money allocated to the federal government, the state and the local government has increased over the years. Over this year, month on month, we have seen it increase from what we had at the beginning of the year. We are seeing that we are improving in our oil production, in as much as the prices of the barrel are still not high as it should be, but it doesn't change the fact that, you know what, we are still making money. In as much as, yes, our debt servicing is copying a lot of our revenue, over 90% of our revenue, we are still generating some amount of revenue in the country, and we just hope that it's being channeled to the right direction, it's being channeled to the projects that need it, it's being channeled to the infrastructure that need it, to the things that will really help with the growth of Nigeria.
Well, Richard, we just hope all of this thing. We still have a lot of chatting to do. I hope that we'll leave it for other programs subsequently. Let's take a look at the Guardian newspaper, where we have Tinubu justify reform unveils 500 billion naira package to ease pains. And here we've seen Tinubu's presidency, road to 100 days, reforms and palliative. The Guardian also, pick out some highlights there. You can read more of that on the front page of the Guardian newspaper. Labour federal government meet again in last attempt to stop tomorrow's protests. Concerns over Mafen delayed 5G development operation. You can find more of that on page 15. Senate Justice promise of thorough screening of ministerial nominees. And on the issue of the Niger coup, groups warn ECOWAS on danger of military intervention. You can find more of that story on page 3. Super Falcons to earn $60,000 each for making the second round. We hope that money gets to them because they have been reported not just to the Super Falcons, but even our women that are presenting us talking about the basketball and the rest of it. The money that's been allocated doesn't get to them. So we hope that this $60,000 gets to reach to these Super Falcons because they have been doing well so far. And on subsidy, time for sacrifice and responsible governance. So you can find that story on page 12, and that's all on the Guardian newspaper.
On Daily Sun, sit at home, enough is enough, says Ohaneze. More details can be found on page 26. The big story on the paper, Tinubu hits of fuel price intervention. Promises salary review, investment of 100 billion naira on buses, reveals how government saved 1 trillion naira in 2 months. Decorates CDF service chiefs, charges them to maintain peace and stability. Broadcast sham, statement coming from Atiku. More details can be found on page 21. Anger swells in Oyo, Osun as protesters block government house roads. We will not die in silence, coming from Lagos NLC. Lagos declares 50, 25% discount on transport fare. No going back on the protest, coming from Labour. Supreme Court Justice FHC Judge Dai Nweze was astute and erudite jurist. A statement coming from the NBA. His death shocking and a big loss. A statement coming from Kalu. More details can be found on page 8. Court restrains Abia panel from probing ex-governor of Pezu and others. Federal government raises security concerns over second Niger breach. Senate screens and confirms Wike, Momo and others as ministers. Urges Labour to shelve impending strike. At the downside of the paper on diphtheria, 83 deaths recorded, says NPHCDA. More details can be found on page 26. We have a picture story, entrance of Oyo State Government Secretariat Ibadan blocked by workers led by Nigeria Labour Congress and Trade Union Congress to protest hardship over removal of fuel subsidy yesterday. And that's all the news on Daily Sun newspaper.
All right, let's take a look at the Blueprint newspaper. Nakon completes airlift of pilgrims commendable. You can find that on page 5. And on ministerial screening, Malage, Alake, Erufai, 11 others take turn as female nominees shine. You can find that on page 5. MPHCDA and CDC others move to curb diphtheria spread in Nigeria. The big story for the Blueprint, federal government saved over 1 trillion naira from petrol subsidy in 2 months, coming from Tinubu, says the new minimum wage palliative coming. Remove restriction on student loan to distribute 30,000 buses to states. I have my reservation over president's broadcast, coming from Atiku. You can find all the story on page 7 and 6. Tinubu decorate new service chief and charges them on teamwork. Thief Idoma Group clash over Benue ministerial nominee. You can find that on page 9. Banks struggle to meet demand of the PTA as dollar scarcity persists. You can find that story on page 7. Coming from the federal government, we will fund 75 billion naira worth of enterprises for sustainable economy. Assure stable food will be available and affordable. You can find that story on page 6. Picture story, we can see the president and the vice with some of the service chief during the decoration, and that's all on the Blueprint newspaper.
On the Matrix newspaper, CBN control foreign exchange market gone, Tinubu tells EIU. Tinubu finally moves to Aso Rock. You can find the details on page 8. Senate screens Wike, Kyari, Onye Choja, 11 others at 4 ministerial nominees. You can find more details on page 4. The big story, the Tinubu's promises. Vows to boost manufacturing sector with 75 billion naira between July and March 2024. Says federal government will acquire 3,000 CNG fuel buses for mass transit. Promises new national minimum wage, infrastructure support for state. NFL subsidy, Lagos reduced BRT commercial bus fares on all routes rolls out. You can find more details on page 3. Tinubu directs federal institutions to halt fees hike. Still on the paper, organized labor says no going back on planned strike. Ondo State announces 30-year infrastructure development plan. Tinubu appoints a jury in Galilei as special advisor on media publicity. More details can be found on page 9. And we have a picture story where we can see the deposed president of Niger Republic and Debbie. Now we have ECOWAS envoy and Chad transitional president Mahamad Debbie meets the deposed president of Niger Republic, Mohamed Bazoum, in Niger Republic yesterday. And that's all the news on the Matrix newspaper.
Well, before we move further with other paper review, we'd love to take a break at this moment so we can open the phone lines. We want to hear what your contribution are. What are your thoughts concerning a lot of stories on the paper, the address for the president, screening of some of the ministerial nominees by the Senate, and also we've seen a lot of protests in Oyo and Ondo regarding palliative and also increase and withheld salaries. So we hope to hear from you when we come back from the break. Please stay tuned with us. Thanks for staying tuned. It's still the Dailies on Echo Television International. I'm still your host, Sela Elisha Dasham, and I say I have Rachel Tanzer with me. Thanks so much, Rachel, for doing this with me. Yes, before we went on the break, we're looking at various stories on the paper. We saw that of the address of the president. We also saw that protests rocked in Oyo State regarding withheld salaries, and also Ondo, workers are talking about palliative. We saw a lot of things happening on the papers and reactions coming regarding the speech of the president. We've seen that of Atiku, his aide, and other analysts concerning why the president did not include how to, talk about security, fixing our refineries and all of that. So we'd love to hear what your own thoughts are. What are your contribution regarding any of the story? Please turn down the volume of your TV set when you call us, because it's important. We'd love to hear what you have to say, and other viewers at home will love to hear what you have to say. So before we will allow you right now to call us while we take some of the papers. Let's take a look at the Punch newspaper. Senate screened 14 tackle nominees over age and tax. You can find that on page 29. We have external reserve shed $167 million as Naira slump further. Tinubu decorates service chief generals pledge loyalty. You can find on page 7. The big story on subsidy paying. Labour insists on protest as Tinubu okays 500 billion naira palliative and 3,000 buses. With the right of federal government plan wage increase relief of MSMEs, others resume talk with NLC today. NLC foiled federal government reform. Lagos slashes fare as protests rock Oyo and Osun State. Gallant Falcons pocket 1 billion naira. Reach World Cup last 16. You can find that story on page 31. And on the fuel price hike, drivers threaten to dump Bolt and Uber. You can find that on page 21. Resident groan as medical workers desert collapse Ogun Health Center. You can find that story on page 4 and 5. Adopters collected 350,000 naira to release Mrs. Ondo kidnap victim. Nigeria junta arrests top politicians. Germany withdraws aid. You can find more of that story. I take that story again. Nigeria junta arrests top politicians. Germany withheld its aid to the country. You can find detail of that on page 30. And that's all on the Punch newspaper.
On the Nation newspaper, it's time to deliver, President tells service chiefs. Labour insists on protest despite ongoing talks with government. Lagos slashes bus fare by 50%, poor families to get food packs. The drama of ministerial screening day 1. More details can be found on page 7. We have the big story, subsidy paying Tinubu rolls out relief package. President outlines measures to lift economy, obey others hail presidential plan. You can find more details of that on page 4 and 5. And we have the highlight which we've gone over in the previous papers. And then we also have a statement from the president. This period may be hard on us, and there is no doubt about it that it is tough on us. But I urge you all to look beyond the present temporary pains and aim at the larger picture. All of our good and helpful plans are in the works. I know that they will work out, and we are also hopeful that it works out. At the downside of the paper, we have diphtheria has killed 83 and infected 839, and then we have the CBN exempts microfinance bank from cash withdrawal limits. You can find the details inside the paper, and that's all the news on the Nation newspaper.
All right, let's take a look at the world of business from Business Day newspaper. Tinubu outlined 125 billion naira plan for the MSMEs to ease economic pain, with rather 1 million nano businesses to get 50,000 naira each, 100 billion naira for 3,000 CNG fuel mass transit buses, over 1 trillion naira saved after petrol subsidy removal. You can find all of that and see how most of these businesses will survive with 50,000 naira. We have foreign exchange pressure piles up as dealers bid at 900 naira per dollar. Nigerian banks impaired loans to surge on reform fallout coming from Finch. We also have Nigeria plans global investment roadshow ahead of the NNPC IPO. You can turn to page 28 where you find detail of that story. Tinubu's cronies get easy pass as bow and go tradition continues. You can find all of that story on the front page and on page 31. And that's all on Business Day newspaper.
Let's look at some stories happening in the world of sports. On Sporting Sun, Bayern to smash transfer record to get Kane. Al Hilal makes £120 million offer for Osimhen plus wage packet worth £1 million per week. Osimhen Napoli reject offer. The big story, 2023 FIFA Women's World Cup, Super Falcons may face England in round of 16. That will be a tough match and will earn 68.8 million naira each. You can find more details on page 6. We have the Tigers to know quarterfinal opponent today. Liverpool begins talks with PSG on loan deal for Mbappe. Messi pays Maradona tribute in Petro Argentina kid as Inter Miami 6 backer talks about his farewell game. Arsenal weighing up shock swoop for Kvaratskhelia, and you can find more details on the center page of the paper. We have the burner Kyle Walker spent £8.5 thousand on alcohol in Korean nightclub. Ten Hag furious Man U defenders after Dortmund defeat. Onana gets the bashing for Maguire rant. You can find more details on page 2. We have Hazard considers retirement. More details can be found on page 3. And we have on WTA ranking, Swiatek remains on top. And we have Rush reach new height. You can find the details at the back page. And that's all the news on Sporting Sun.
All right, let's take a look at the national economy, still business. where we have the ugly story of Nigerians on ending gas flaring. Expert tax the government on recovering unpaid $9 billion fine as oil firm adamant. You can find more of that story inside the paper. Driving fintech adoption at the bottom of the pyramid. You can find that on page 10. Implement implication of streamlining Nigerian's tax system. You can find that on page 12. And also we have understanding post no debits. You can find that story inside the paper, and that's all on National Economy newspaper.
On the Vanguard newspaper, cash squeeze, low returns drag down investment in federal government savings bond. Tension as ex-Emir Sanusi protest reappears in Kano government house. 110 suspects arrested as Fintiri relaxes curfew visits looted warehouses. And on subsidy removal, Tinubu orders federal institution to stop arbitrary fees hike. Supreme Court NBA Obaseki Mbamon as Justice Nweze dies at 64. The big story on the paper, Tinubu attacks hardship with 500 billion naira palliative. There are writers on the story. You can find more details on page 5. Labour insists on nationwide mass protests from tomorrow. Boko Haram terrorists kill 11 farmers and injure one in failed and ransom deal in Borno. We have more of an infograph showing Tinubu's petrol subsidy, palliatives, and his plan. We have Senate host screening of 3 ministerial nominees over alleged forgery and age falsification. The details you can find on page 3, and that's all news on Vanguard newspaper.
Richard, something quickly came to my mind looking at the speech of the president, and that is regard the transport for students. Are we sure schools will not have a way to actually get some money out of students for those buses? That is one. Secondly, the president is ordering that they should stop the hike of federal school fees, tuition fee in this tertiary institution. Is it with just words of mouth we're going to do this, or is there a document that has been written and to ask? Because this is not the first time. There was a time where the Senate also, or was it the reps, actually came out to say that talking about increasing of tuition fee in unity schools and also in federal varsities as a public university should be stopped. But we still see that universities actually increase the tuition fee and all of that. Now the president is coming out. So I don't know how is he going to make sure that that actually come up, because by September, October, the session, a fresh session is starting. And then with the way people are already crying, things are really not going to go well. Parents are wondering how they'll be able to sponsor if they have more than one kid in the tertiary institution and the federal university. Scholarship, that we do have exchange program from one state to another. We don't know how all of this is going to go. So I don't know, how is the government intending to monitor this movement, talking about the buses? All right, let's take this call. Hello, good morning. Hello.
I remember.
Okay.
That when Jonathan was there as the president, he encouraged people, and they were refining products through modular refineries. And I remember that time gas was around 100 and so if our president could do well to allow people to go into this modular refinery so that this 12 of it come down, then refine it outside and bring it back, it will be costed. That's my little contribution. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that contribution. Yes, it's concerning the refinery. Why don't the government allow these small modular refineries? And yes, we've talked about that before, Sele. And we have to say that regardless of how small they are, they have to be up to standard for us to be able to cope up pollution, because that's one of the major damage these unlicensed refinery does to the Niger Delta region. We have oil spillage, and then it can be managed if only these refineries are operating legally with license and they are up to standard. So yes, let the government step in and of course come to a way that these refineries will be able to help in oil production in the country, that they will be able to meet the guidelines and the standard to help reserve the ecosystem in that area and to minimize pollution.
Yeah. So I was actually asking about the students and also how is the government open
Yes,
to
Ella.
monitor that, Rachel?
Of course. I believe this is the time that the SUG needs to wake up. Like they really, really need to wake up because they will be the one with the responsibility to make sure that the school don't exploit what the government is trying to do, because there is that possibility. Say like we are in Nigeria and we know
All
what
right, let's take the
happens.
score.
I just want to speak on Tinubu's President Tinubu's speech. The fact remains that when a president said he's going to continue from a failed president, you don't expect anything good from it. So that is exactly what we are seeing today. If you look at his speech and all, there was nothing like revamping the refinery or making any good thing about how to curb the issue of fuel hike and all. And that is the major benchmark of the rises of inflation that we have in our country today. Asana. So with that, coping that, every other thing you do, the suffering will still continue, nothing to cut it off. So I don't know where we'll go from here.
Thank you very
All
much.
right.
I said before that 50,000 you want to give these nano businesses get to them, they would have shut down before it gets to them because of the way things are going as it is now. So it's true. Let the government fix the real problems and just stop beating around the bush concerning what is happening. So yes, Ella, I believe now is the time for the SUJ in schools in the tertiary universities to wake up, because this is where now you need to protect the interests of fellow students like you. You need to make sure that when these bosses are out there, it is what the government is saying. You need to make sure that let your voices be heard. Be the voice there to make sure that you know what, there is actually no increase in the tertiary fees and all of that, because I know that they have been the body with the responsibility to make sure that the welfare of students are being heard and things are going on smoothly. But over the years, it feels like the SUG don't do much. I mean, we went through
I
tertiary
think
university.
SUG is not strong. The problem is that the school tend to overshadow the SUG, and then
It's
since
not
we don't
supposed
have
to be
dogged
so.
and rugged, presidents and union to stand up for the student, both off and in campus. I was opportune to listen to the SUG of SUG president of the University of Jos here, and he was talking about when all of them were being invited by the school management. They were not really told what the meeting was, but they had a hint that it was going to be regarding increase of the tuition fee, and they sat themselves together to talk about the fact that we have to stand up for the students, because eventually this is what's going to happen. If you're saying that returning students are paying 150,000 and then new student that's talking about 100 or direct entry 200 are going to be paying over 200,000 naira school fees, they know that that is really a big deal. So imagine if a mother or father is having more than one kid, and we know the way it is, you have about 3 of the siblings, one is just in 100 level, another is in the final year, and then you're thinking about other monies are coming regarding the let's look at the different departments there. If you're in a department where you have a lot of books to produce, or if you're in an arts department that you have a lot of plays and all of that, there is money involved in that. So honestly, just like you were saying, I think it's high time that the SUG stand up strong the way we know them to be before, because if you're talking about buses, it's needed. Of course, we'll tell them to pay something little or that. Well, hello, good morning.
Hello. Hello.
We are
Good
with you. Good
morning.
morning.
Hello.
Okay.
Hello. Good morning.
Good morning.
My contribution is that in democracy is government of the people, by the people, and for the people. The government of the day supposed to listen to the public. They're supposed to listen to the individual. If you are ruling people, we have what we call public opinion. You listen before government do something. The National Assembly will debate it. This place we are living, Benin Republic, if they want to do something, the National Assembly will debate it. They go to their constituency and see the mind of the people they are ruling. Then you rule with the mind of the people. If the people agree, like this palliative they want to give, many Nigerians have said they don't need this palliative, but you want to insist these people that they must, it's a force. It's not a force. They say they need this money for you to put electricity. See, make I tell you, my sisters, we are living in Benin Republic. We have about 1 million or 2 million Nigerians working here. They are doing computer engineers. Some of them are doing radio mechanics because there is constant life. People are doing this The job they cannot do in Nigeria, but they are getting money. Many of them do everything, small jobs because of constant electricity. The only source that God can do is electricity. With electricity, people will survive. We have Igbo people here in Brussels doing many things with electricity in Benin Republic here. Why can't Nigerian government fix electricity? If you fix electricity, you fix employment. Because people will benefit from that electricity. You want to share 8,000 to people. To do what? 8,000 reach children, 2 children in a week. Fix electricity. People will do employment. For government to say you employ, to create employment is electricity. If electricity, that is the only source of employment. If they can fix electricity in Nigeria, my sister, nobody can go and say, come and give me money. You show the people how to do the thing. People will be doing all kinds of jobs with the electricity. Those burdens, they will get their money. Those doing hairdressing, they will get their money. That is the only source, the only thing government can do. Even if they want to fix that, if they don't want to fix the refinery, let them fix electricity. Electricity is very public here. People are doing it. Nobody here is complaining because electricity is 24 hours. People are doing their job, getting their money. My sister, let us pray so that God will help us, like other small countries in Africa. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
That's not far from the truth, Sele. If electricity should be available, businesses will see more profit and there will be more employability in the country because we will be seeing more businesses springing up and more. We will have industries. We will have more manufacturers. We are going to thrive. They made mention of bringing electric buses. Where would you see the electricity to charge it? Exactly. So yes, electricity is key amidst many other resources that we need available in this country. Electricity is key. So let's have a government that does what is needed rather than avoiding the real problem and just trying to give what will not be substantial.
Yeah, just like we saw in the paper, Dangote, Nestle, and the rest were recording their losses in the midst of all of this. So it's not far-fetched from the issue of the electricity and the petrol, subsidies. So we just hope better things are being done, honestly, Rachel. So. Well, that's how far we can go on the program this morning. Thanks so much, Rachel.
You're welcome, Sally.
Thank you to our callers for calling on the program. Thank you to the crew members. Thank you to our supporters and to the Echo Executive. Until we come you again, to have a blessed day ahead.